We should dream big. We should live even bigger. So I want to tell all the product managers listening to this, make sure that one, if you're a parent, you teach your kids this for sure. And because our brain are these wonderful organs that has a capability of neuroplasticity, it's never too late. So if your team members haven't had the privilege of being exposed to this thought process, it's something that you need to do. I can
Yeah.
maybe share here that in a recent survey, more than 100 leaders were asked, do you have strong motivation and drive to use every obstacle to grow stronger and more resilient? And only 70% of them could, without a doubt, said, absolutely. We are the other
Mhm.
30%, right? Can you imagine if you have a team of 10 people and in there, three of them don't have growth mindsets? You're in trouble.
Yeah.
Right? And that's such an
Hmm.
easy fix. I
Yeah.
think simply just by encouraging creativity and learning. If you give them the opportunities to grow in ways that they want to grow in, you can definitely help them build their positive growth mindsets.
Welcome to the Product Weekend podcast, where we dive into conversations that inspire and challenge the way we think about product management, leadership, and innovation. In every episode, we explore how to build high performing teams, foster psychological safety, and lead with purpose. My name is Joao Moita, and today we have an awesome guest with us from whom you'll hear more in just a second. Before we jump in, make sure to follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or your preferred podcast platform. And if you enjoy what you hear, leave a review. It only takes a moment and helps us bring even more value to the product community. Let's get started. Hello, Estie. Welcome to the Product Weekend podcast. It's great to have you here.
Hi, Joel. It's so great to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you for joining. So, we'll dive into your background in just a little bit. It's really impressive and very interesting mix of different disciplines. But before we get to that, I wanted to ask a bit of a personal question. What's a recent weekend that you really enjoyed?
I think one of the weekends that really stands out has to be during the holidays, having family from South Africa visiting us in Switzerland. I think it's,
Awesome.
so blessed to have that and to spend time with them. We don't often get chance. So that was really good.
Awesome. Cool. The holiday season is always a
Yeah.
nice time to connect with friends and family.
That's
So, getting into the juicy part. So, you have this incredible background that blends science, medicine, entrepreneurship. Could you share a little bit with us your journey and how you arrived at focusing on neuroleadership and brain based leadership?
Sure. So I used to be a medical doctor working in family practice. I started up a clinical trial center. So career was up here at that moment. This all happened in South Africa. But then my husband got a job offer in Geneva. So I gave up my career, looked after the kids. It was a blessed time and I loved every moment of it. But I needed a bit more. So I started doing a whole lot of things online. And while being an online entrepreneur, I recognize the unique challenges female entrepreneurs face, right? It's just very difficult
Hmm.
sometimes for us. And there's definitely an untapped potential for women in leadership. So I just took all my education as a clinician, as a scientist, combined it with all my experience in business and corporate, being a female founder, and I started creating these brand advantage programs. And it's simply just about taking all those complex neuroscience data out there and funneling them into practical tools that can help us to lead with more impact. And it has grown so much, not only female leaders, I'm also doing corporate trainings, workshop for individuals, female initiatives, teams, startups. And I even started to help executive coaches on how they can add brain science into their approaches to be more effective. So it's been a blessed, wonderful journey. And neuro leadership is definitely a very exciting field.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing. And I hope today you'll also be able to help some of our listeners. We all obviously have a lot of female leaders also listening. And yeah, a lot of things you mentioned I want to dive deeper into, but maybe starting with how exactly this science connects to leadership. How does neuroscience play a role in leadership, and why is it important for leaders to understand the brain's advantages?
Great question, and I get that quite often. And I think neuroscience plays such a crucial role in leadership. It provides us insight into how our brain works, right? How we process information and how it influences our thoughts and our behaviors. And as we know, when we understand how something works, it becomes so easy to control that process. We can identify challenges and we can make changes to perform better. So I think understanding our unique advantages is super important because it gives us self-awareness. We can start to recognize our own patterns of thinking and behavior. It can help us to optimize our performance. Also in team development, right? There's a way to promote psychological safety and well-being based on neuroscience, and it promotes effective collaboration. I mean, that's what psychological safety is all about. And I think one of the more important things is also inclusive leadership, just recognizing those diverse cognitive strengths to promote more inclusive and effective leadership practices. So a whole lot of things that it can definitely help us to be better in our leadership roles.
Yeah, that's super interesting, and it's definitely a topic that we're very interested in and dive deeper, like these team dynamics. How can teams be highly performant and in a psychologically safe environment? From a neuro leadership perspective, how can leaders create these environments where the team members feel safe to take risks, voice opinions, contribute openly? If you can share like some specific tactics or approaches that leaders can take, I think it could be very useful.
Sure. So, I mean, firstly, psychological safety is a priority. And that's why I love the kind of trainings and events that you guys do, because I think it should be a number one priority in all organizations. And I believe that psychological safety is about creating that safe work environment, right? Where everyone is comfortable to take risks, to share their ideas, and to making mistakes. But one step for me, the kind of next step is just creating psychological well-being, right? And that's about the individual's experience within that safe environment. It's about positive emotions, low levels of
Right.
stress, sense of purpose, strong relationships. And I think with this World Economic Forum in Davos last week, they underscored that importance. They were saying brain health, which encompasses the neurological health, the mental health, the cognitive performances, it's a critical global and priority. And it excites me so much when at forums like these, they highlight the importance of the kind of work that we do. So coming back to your question from a neuro leadership perspective, I think there's many things that we can do to promote psychological safety and well-being. Is it things like just activating the brain's reward circuit, right? So we can use our feel-good hormones like dopamine and oxytocin, give that a boost in our members by simply recognizing their contributions, right? And just promoting social interactions with them. That helps with trust, with collaboration, and with the openness to change. We can very easily balance psychological safety with accountability. So while building a safe environment, I think the leader should maintain clear expectations and responsibilities, because then we get a balance that activates the brand's reward system, but also its goal-orientated regions. And then we get better engagement, better performance. Another thing is what we spoke about earlier, that cognitive diversity. I think that's a very important topic, just understanding the different kinds of thinking, the way our team members communicate. So we can create that environment that they all feel valued and included. And that activates those brain regions that has to do with social belonging. And as soon as we do that, we reduce their threat response. So they respond so much better to whatever we put open on the floor that we have to work on.
So is it about like a lot of the things you're mentioning, it's things we've been talking about with many people as like advice and general good practices that teams can or that leaders can do and create in their teams, but I never thought necessarily about the brain processes behind them. Do you think it's important to understand what's happening behind, or do you think just the tips in general are enough to create the environment? How do you think about that?
I
And
think it's
also in your trainings and the
Mhm.
kind of
I think it's very important to understand how it works. Remember, that's what we said earlier. When we understand how a process works, we can take ownership of that process, right? If we know how the stress loop works, We know which neurotransmitters has an effect. Then we know what we can change to make that process better. And when we understand that the brain and how it happens in the brain has such a big impact on the way that we think and the way that we speak and the way that we interact with other people, we can start to see what we can do based on that physiological process to be better at it. So yes, I think it's very, very important to understand. And that's why a big part of the trainings that I do is starting with the brain science, just showing them how it happens in the brain and then how they can leverage that to be better.
Right. Cool. Actually, I haven't dived into this topic for the last few years, but a few years ago, I read some things more about like how the brain works, and it was very interesting and very informative also to the way I approach then my interactions and so on. Do you have any specific recommendations of like authors or books that help people that are starting from scratch, from zero, that haven't heard about this topic, to just get started and start understanding a little bit of the brain? Any specific recommendations that come to mind?
So absolutely. I mean, at the very foundation of all of this for me is having a positive growth mindset. And I think the works from Carol Dweck is very, very important here. I think there is so many good podcasts and discussions going about neuroleadership at the moment. I can't think of anything specific now, but I mean, just starting to read about how it affects leadership. LinkedIn, I mean, is a gold mine, right? There's so many good stuff coming from there. Even you guys, the things that you do, the tips that you share, that's where you should start, because it's not about reading the scientific articles. I mean, that's my job, right? That's not what it's about. It's about reading whoever takes that science and turns it into
Yeah.
practical stuff, because that's what helps us, the practical tools.
Right. Awesome. And also, if something else comes to mind, you can share after the recording, and I can include in the show notes.
I'll definitely make a
Um,
list.
awesome. That's great. So back to specific tactics, you already mentioned a couple things of activating certain regions of the brain. One thing you wrote about recently on LinkedIn, actually, if I'm not mistaken, the technique called the power pause. Can you explain what it is and what's the effects of it, the potential benefits of that specific technique?
Absolutely. I mean, that is a very good example of how we can use science to create a practical tool. So the power pause is a very easy, proven strategy that just helps us to balance our stress and emotions and boost our performance and resilience. And I mean, that's so important in a psychological safe workspace. So we all know the Pomodoro technique, where they say we're supposed to work for 20 to 25 minutes and then take a 5-minute break, right? So I'm saying use that technique absolutely, because it does work, but super boost its benefits by simply adding a little bit of physical activity and mindfulness to your 5-minute break. In other words, when you get up after doing your 20, 25 minutes, instead of just walking to the kitchen and grabbing a coffee, do 20 jumping jacks and then do a minute of deep breathing. It will help you stay focused. It will reduce your stress. It will boost your energy levels. I mean, it's such a simple thing, and it can make such a big impact on your performance. And the way that it works, it simply boosts your dopamine, right? Just one of our neurotransmitters that plays a role in motivation, in reward, in learning. So we get that completing a focused work sprint that provides a sense of accomplishment, it motivates us, and it promotes learning. And then we add a short burst of exercise and mindfulness, and reduces the stress hormones. And you particularly asked how it may be used in terms of psychological safety and well-being. I think it's going to reduce your stress. I mean, clearly, it's going to improve your cognitive function. It's going to enhance your self-regulation, right? Just giving us a moment to pause and reflect, and improving our ability to manage emotions and reactions. And being a team leader, we all know how important that self-regulation is. It will
Yeah.
improve our mental health and increase energy, productivity. I mean, the list is endless. Such a simple tool that can make a huge difference in your day.
Awesome. I love that. I often use the Pomodoro technique, and I never tried the physical activity. I mean, usually small, like short walk around. It's what I do, or stretching.
Good.
But maybe I'll try the intense 1 minute exercise and a bit of breathing. I think that can be really powerful.
I'd like to hear your
That's
feedback after doing that.
will do. We'll share with you.
Cool.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing. I think that's a very practical one that people can put into practice from today, even. So, diving a little bit into a topic that I know you're very passionate about, and that is maybe where it all came from, the motivation to start diving deeper, which is female leadership. How do you see brain-based leadership benefiting female leaders in particular? What are some unique challenges or strengths that they bring to leadership roles?
So I think I have to kick it off by saying that brain-based leadership can benefit all leaders, right? Because
Exactly.
it gives us this deep understanding of how our brain works. And I think there was a podcast interview that you did with Sergio, and you were talking about the pillars of psychological safety. And he mentioned that it's about using your strengths, right? And that is exactly what brain-based leadership is all about. And I think that's why your training ticks one of the most important tick boxes, right? Just to focus on strengths. Stop telling people what they can't do and focus on their strengths. So when we talk about female leaders and we identify and help them to leverage their unique strengths, it's things like empathy, collaboration, strong communication skills. We have a particularly good emotional awareness and we're able to read nonverbal cues very well. And if you just teach them how to do that even a little bit better, they become very strong leaders. And we have to, at the same time, say there is potential challenges, right? We face imposter syndrome. We have this pressure to conform to traditional leadership styles. So when we start to embrace these brain-based principles, we can cultivate the self-awareness that we need to overcome this. We can build stronger relationships and we can create more inclusive, effective leadership practices. And I think that's very exciting for female leaders. As soon as they realize this is what they can do just by understanding their brain, it is great. But at the same time, I want to say that, the brain advantage is just two sides of the same coin. What we can say for females, we can say for males, right? So in male leaders, they've got particular strengths in visual communication, risk taking, being results orientated. And they have at the same time the unique challenges. Sometimes a little bit of emotional awareness that's lacking, just balancing their rationality with empathy. And being part of collaborative decision making is sometimes
Yeah.
problems that we need to face. I mean, you would be able to answer that better than me. But
Yeah.
again, when we embrace the neuroscience leadership for them, they become more effective, more well-rounded
Right.
leaders, right? And we can enhance their emotional intelligence, improve their adaptability. Very important that I also see in male leaders is to help them just that little bit with stress management, because that is often a problem just because they are so driven. So
Yeah.
leveraging those unique strengths, addressing those potential challenges based on what we know about the brain is just all about helping them grow and be the best leaders that they can be.
Right. And I imagine that it also starts with this awareness and
Mm,
assessment, like internal or assisted somehow, but assessment of your own unique strengths as an individual more than male or female. Like
exactly.
you as the things you mentioned, probably they are statistically more prominent in one gender or the other, but there are specific traits and unique traits that each person has, and it's about understanding those nuances also and how you can leverage your own unique strengths, right?
That's exactly it. It's not about gender differences. It's about your uniqueness. That's what it's all about.
Just a quick break. If you're enjoying the episode, don't forget to hit follow and leave a rating. Your support keeps us going and helps us share even more insights with listeners like you. Now, let's get back to the conversation. Yeah, awesome. That's super interesting. And how do you think, like we already touched on it, but how does this individual understanding of your own way of working, let's say, how does it translate to team environments? And are there any specific, like, interventions or activities or approaches that you would do or that you would suggest on a team level to leverage this these trends and the brain advantage of the team members?
Sure. I think it's all just about creating that environment where everyone feels safe, and comfortable to voice their opinions. And one of the big things is avoiding mental overload, right? I mean, that is such a big and easy thing that we can do, and just give them extreme clarity in their roles, their processes, their goals, so that there's no uncertainty. It helps to mitigate that threat response that happens in the brain when we're not exactly sure what we need to do. Linked to that is what we just said, keeping in mind that everyone is different, right? That we all have those unique skills. And, I'm thinking about the Future Ready Leaders program that we are doing. We're looking at psychological well-being in there. And I think maybe if this is useful for your listeners, I can share a link where they can download this little 10 questions, which simply determines where is your psychological well-being at. Are there specific challenges that you need to face and need to fix, not only for yourself, but also for your team members? Just giving them this little questionnaire and they complete it, and you can immediately see, where the issues are.
So, and if someone is looking to improve their leadership and foster the psychological safety in their teams, what are maybe, let's say, 3 simple science-backed steps they can take today?
So I think the first one is just model vulnerability and openness. I mean, share your mistakes, your uncertainties. It activates the brain reward circuitry. It promotes feeling of including everyone else and trust. And, there's this important thing where our amygdala is the fight or flight response, and then our prefrontal cortex is where all the logical thinking happens. And when we keep triggering the amygdala, what happens? We feel threatened, and our logical thinking is completely, at the bottom. So if we just show that we are vulnerable, we're open, and we're willing to own our mistakes, it makes it so much easier for the rest of our team to do the same. The second thing we can do is, like we said in the power pause, manage your stress, practice mindfulness, right? It improves our emotional regulation. It strengthens that prefrontal cortex control over the amygdala that's trying to threaten us. And another one perhaps is just to encourage feedback, ask open-ended questions, activate that brain social reward system that we were talking about earlier, reduce uncertainty, increase the perception of autonomy, lower the stress. There's so many things, but I think 3 things that they can definitely do is just that: model vulnerability and be open, own your mistakes, practice the mindfulness using something like the power pause, and encourage feedback. And that will definitely in our teams help them be more creative, more collaborative, and increase our performance.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing. Those are great tips, and it's also great and reassuring to hear that they are backed by brain science and that they actually work in different contexts. So thank you for that. Just to start wrapping up, I wanted to get a little bit of a more specific example of a team you worked with where you felt that maybe you're a part of, or you worked with as a trainer or something like this, where people didn't feel comfortable sharing their thoughts, and how did that impact the effectiveness of the team, and also how did this situation or this environment impact the brain responses of the people in the team? Do you have any examples that come to mind?
So an example that I can definitely share is a project manager. She worked in a big organization, and she did a big training on psychological safety, and she was so excited, all these positive outcomes that came from that: increased communication, collaboration, they minimized the conflicts, the misunderstandings. And then she said, then all of a sudden there were some concerning signs, right? She had increased stress and burnout in her team all of a sudden, right? The communication was better, but the team was just constantly bombarded with all these new ideas and feedback, and there was an increased stress and sense of being overwhelmed along with that. She was complaining about a lack of work-life balance all of a sudden, because everyone has this expectation to be constantly available and responsive, and becoming a struggle to maintain that healthy work-life balance. And she was also mentioning that the team members are less motivated. They have this pressure to contribute, and a lack of clear boundaries, I'm guessing, was an issue there. And it led to decreased motivation and engagement. And I mean, that proves that we need to focus on psychological well-being as well, right? About
Mm-hmm.
thriving in that psychologically safe environment. And we need to do that because we have to ensure long-term sustainability and success. So what did we do? We helped her to put in place ways to prioritize rest and recovery. Small thing, encouraging those regular breaks with physical activity, with meditation added in there. Very important,
Mm-hmm.
setting those clear boundaries, right, for after work
Right.
hours. They also started having open discussions about stress and burnout. Yes, we have
Yeah.
this optimized, great environment, but we need to make sure that that doesn't lead into stress and burnout. Promoting work-life balance. At the moment, we have this attitude of always on. You always have your phone on you. You can always answer an email. I mean, that's so bad. I remember you had
Mm-hmm.
a LinkedIn post earlier that had those memes, and there was this picture of the woman
Mm-hmm.
had to choose between a work day for 12 hours or work-life balance, and it's kind of the
Yeah.
same thing. It's exactly it. Well,
Yeah.
no, I just wanted to say one last thing maybe is I listened to this one of your podcasts, I think Ezra Yetis it was
Mm-hmm.
with, talk about the power of diverse teams. And she was just saying how important it is to give team members control and ownership. You know, we should
Mm-hmm.
guide them. We shouldn't be commanding and prescriptive. And that's exactly it. That's something that we worked with in that team as well, just to be more flexible and to offer them autonomy so they take ownership not only of what needs to get done, but also of their own day, of their own schedule, and their own professional development plans. You know, that's an
Mm-hmm.
interesting one as well. Don't expect your teams just to be upskilling and reskilling because that's what needs to happen. Give
Yeah.
them cognitive well being before you start to do that and give them the ownership.
Right. I love that framing, and I think it's very useful and powerful for people to think about, not just creating the environment where people can share, but also where people thrive and feel their best selves and can perform to the best of their abilities. And I think it's also in product management in particular, it's always like a thin line between like ownership and doing something that you love and being engaged and having this well-being. Like a lot of times people feel like they are doing their best work and they are super happy with what they're doing, but without those limits, those boundaries, they end up again working these extra hours, feeling stressed all the time, even if sometimes it doesn't feel like stress because you're doing something that you like, so it doesn't feel negative. It's a really thin balance, to like a tight rope to navigate, but it's really important and really valuable to have these mental models and these different approaches. So thank you for sharing. I think there's a lot of valuable insights here. Just to wrap up, who is someone you look up to in this field of leadership and in the areas that you work on?
I think there is many inspirational people, but I think I want to answer this slightly different in saying that
Mm-hmm.
one of the people that I look up to is my father. Why?
Mm.
Because he taught me from a young age that I can do anything. We should dream big. We should live even bigger. And not realizing when I was a child, but definitely now, he was the catalyst of my positive growth mindset, right? He pushed me from a young age to believe that I can do whatever I can. So, I mean, I want to tell all the product managers listening to this, make sure that one, if you're a parent, you teach your kids this for sure. And because our brain are these wonderful organs that has a capability of neuroplasticity, it's never too late. So if
Mm-hmm.
your team members haven't had the privilege of being exposed to this thought process, it's something that you need to do. You know, I can
Yeah.
maybe share here that in a recent survey, more than 100 leaders were asked, do you have strong motivation and drive to use every obstacle to grow stronger and more resilient? And only 7%, 70% of them could, without a doubt, said, absolutely. We are the other
Mm.
30%, right? Can you imagine if you have a team of 10 people and in there, three of them don't have growth mindsets? You're in trouble.
Yeah.
Right? And that's such an
Mm-hmm.
easy fix. And I know your next question
Mm.
is going to be, how do we fix it? And I
Yeah.
think simply just by encouraging creativity, and learning. If you give them the opportunities to grow in ways that they want to grow in, you can definitely help them build their positive growth mindsets.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree that's a very important thing to do, but I also feel that it's easier said than done. Like a lot of times in a team, you have this one person or that smaller group of people that no matter how much flexibility and autonomy and creativity, space for creativity you give them, they are always like, no, I'm just here. I just want to get my salary at the end of the month and not think about work that much. Like, do you have any other more specific things on how to deal with those kind of situations? Like, how can you bring these people along? And obviously, I don't believe there's a silver bullet or a solution that works every time. But if you can give a couple of tips or directions for leaders managing a situation like this, what would those be?
So I agree, there's always people like that, right? One, I think you should reconsider who's in your team, definitely, because these are not the kind of people that
Mm-hmm.
you want there. But unfortunately, we don't always have that choice. But with that being said, when we in positions to choose team leaders, we have to make sure of who are included, what are their skills, and if they don't have all the skills needed, how can we help them grow those skills? That is the first thing. So choosing your team wisely. Secondly, do you remember what we said earlier about diversity? People learn in
Mm-hmm.
different ways. People communicate in different ways. And just because one of the team members is not on the same level as us, communicating like we do, doesn't mean they're wrong. It doesn't mean that they really just there to get their salary at the end of the month, right? There's
Mm-hmm.
something else there. And very often when we start having discussions with that person that is everyone is feeling are not doing their share, they have a problem with someone in the team. So they don't feel comfortable doing their share in front of that person because they feel like they always get shot down, and they the typical psychological safety issues, right, is there for them. And they just have never admitted to this because of pride, right? We don't
Mm-hmm.
feel we don't feel comfortable sharing those kinds of feelings. So it's going to that person, having one-on-one sessions with them and trying to find what lies at the bottom of this. Or they may be in a position that they don't want to be. Do they feel that their contribution is not recognized? Do they need a different kind of training? Right? Just because we enjoy workshops and being active and doing our thing and learning together, a lot of people are not like that, right? They
Mm-hmm.
prefer listening to an audio or watching a video all by themselves, taking notes, and then coming back and putting it to good use. So just making sure you understand the way that they communicate and learn will definitely also have a big impact on that. You know, there's this big thing about cognitive communication and learning your team members, the way that they talk, reading between the lines. As we said earlier, that is one of our super skills as women. We're very good at this. So if this is a problem in your team, whether you are male or female, maybe connect with one of the female team members, put them together, get them to grow
Mm-hmm.
close, and find out what is holding him back and what can we do to get him to be better.
Cool. Thank you for sharing. Those are very useful tips and approaches. I love that. And yeah, I just have to thank you so much for joining us. It was great chatting and learning more from your experiences. I think even though you're not that much in the product management bubble, there's a lot of actionable tips for product managers and product leaders to bring to their own work and to their teams. So really appreciate you being here and sharing it all of us. So thank you so much.
It was great being here with you. Thank you for inviting me. And I'm looking forward to seeing a lot more action happening within the product weekend.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And we'll also be sharing your links in the show notes so that people can find you and learn more about your journey and offering as well.
Great.
So thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to the Product Weekend podcast. We hope today's episode sparked some new ideas and inspired you on your journey. If you found it valuable, be sure to follow us and share the podcast with others who might benefit. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Connect with us on LinkedIn or send us an email at team@theproductweekend.com. Until next time, Keep learning, leading, and making an impact. See you in the next episode.